her greatest achievement is to
Yeah,
live to 94 years old
pretty
and
good.
to have children. Thankfully, she never had to bury a child, but when she buried my children, I would
Mm.
say that was about as close to children because she had a very good, nice bond with my children. They
Yeah.
were very close to grandma.
What can we do to celebrate the lives of those we love after they've passed away? To what does one daughter attribute her mother's long life? How can we celebrate our mothers when they're no longer with us? Welcome, friends, to Breathe But Still Me. Our purpose is to empower members of our community. I'm Michael Lieben, and the father of 3 children, Idan, Sapir, and Liel. Liel, my youngest daughter, was born with a heart defect and later developed autism and then epilepsy. Losing her at 15 is what has brought me here to be the host of this program. Here with us today is our guest, Jackie Renfrow. Jackie's family was treated for epilepsy for years. On April 15th, 2000, she received a call saying that her son Jimmy had died from having a seizure in his sleep. He left behind a wife and a daughter. Just 2 years after that, her daughter, Chrissy, died the same way on July 25th, 2002, leaving behind an 8-month-old baby. 10 months later, Jackie's mother, Wilodene, was rushed to the hospital for a heart condition called long QT syndrome. Having suffered from seizures for many years, Wilodene was very fearful of her own death, and many times found herself very close to that death. Sadly, it wasn't until 2003 that the family finally discovered that the many family members who died had not died from seizures, but rather from a genetic heart condition. Long QT syndrome is a specific arrhythmia that can be lethal if not addressed properly. It may appear as a person with long QT syndrome is having a seizure, but actually the heart's electrical system is not functioning properly. Wilodene's doctors discovered she had long QT syndrome, and they put an internal defibrillator into her chest to help her heart when it experienced arrhythmias. The defibrillator allowed Wilodene to live into her 90s. Together with her daughter Jackie, she appeared on our podcast twice. Once to talk about losing loved ones to a misdiagnosis, and then again to talk about living with loss after loss. The links to these episodes will be in our show notes. Sadly, Wilodene passed in 2023. Today, Jackie is here with us again, and we have a wonderful opportunity to celebrate her mother's life in this world. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us again on Breathe But Still Me.
It's my pleasure, Michael. Thank you for having me again.
I just want to express our collective sorrow when we heard about Wilodene recently, and a chance for us to say publicly how much we support you and how we feel for what you went through.
Well, thank you so much.
When you and your mother were on the first time, what did that mean to her to be on a podcast?
It meant the world to my mom because she truly loved to share our story and reach out to people in hopes that she would help someone since she had lost both of her grandchildren to long QT. She was hoping to save other people's lives since we had no clue what had taken Jimmy and Chrissy's lives. And she just loved telling the story. So it meant a lot to mom and it meant a lot to me because now I always have a piece of her voice out there I can grab and listen to.
I'm glad I was able to help be part of that. And all of us here at the program are very, I'd like to say happy, but we're not. But I'd like to say that we're all very pleased that we could give that to you. I don't think at the time we realized that's what we were doing. But in retrospect, it is really a wonderful gift that I think a lot of people wish they could have.
Yes, and I'm very thankful that I do have that. Just to hear her voice, I was trying to listen to it the other night. Of course, it's still a little too soon. We're only 2 months out, but
Hmm.
I have it saved on my phone. So anytime I want to listen to it, I can sure do that.
You know, when we met 7 years ago, we had so much to talk about. We realized that we had to record 2 programs because we were talking about living with a misdiagnosis, which is in itself a very serious issue. And I want to get into that a little bit later. But also, loss after loss, your whole family was struck by this. It's apparently genetic. So let's tell our listeners how the diagnosis was finally made and how that changed your family's life.
I lost my son 2000. I received a phone call. He was gone. And then just 2 years later, well, my daughter was getting ready to have a baby. And I was very fearful that something was going to happen to her like it did her brother. And unfortunately, it did on July the 25th, 2002. My daughter had been gone approximately 10 months when I received a phone call that my mom had been rushed to a hospital and was in intensive care for her heart, which she was 72. And I was thinking, okay, well, she probably has some type of maybe having a heart attack or something. And that's when the doctor took us into a room to tell us our mom had a heart arrhythmia called long QT syndrome, and most commonly could affect younger people and even cause death in them. And that's when I looked up to the doctor and made eye contact with him and told him I had just lost my children and I had no clue why I had lost my children. He looks at me and says, "You probably have long QT." They took me and my sister and did an EKG, and our EKG, of course, looked weird. So then we started undergoing the proper test, and we did have long QT syndrome. And me and my sister actually both received a heart defibrillator about a month later, and we even shared our rooms together.
What grabs me here, though, is that Wilodene had seen people dying all around her for 70 plus years, and they didn't know what it was. I guess because technology hadn't come around to figuring that out. But suddenly they did. So did it all come into focus for her, and did it change her in a way that now she had something specific to talk about and to warn people about, and something to work for, something to be involved with?
I can't even explain to you after so many years, it was just like all of a sudden this jigsaw puzzle was coming together, and then the piece just went right in there and it explained everything from why we had to cover the phones when mom was sleeping to keep her from having a seizure, because we had every symptom out there, but no one had just come across it or even checked our heart.
Why did you have to cover the phone? I'm curious. How did that help prevent the seizure?
And you're in a sound sleep with type 2. Type 2 is very dangerous, being startled. And if you're startled, it can cause your heart to go into an arrhythmia and it stops pumping blood, which cuts off the oxygen to your brain and causes a seizure.
Oh my gosh. And you had to
So
live
even
like that
when
for
my
so long.
grandkids, well, my grandkids, once I found out the diagnosis, I would tell the schools to pull them when there was a fire drill so it wouldn't startle them.
Oh boy. I can't even imagine what that's like. If I were afraid of being startled, I think turning on a light would startle me.
It does. It really does. I'm scared of the dark because of that.
I want to try to understand what it's like to be in that family, to be a part of that. It's really hard because everything is wrong. Nothing is good. How do you spend your day like that?
I don't think about it too much for myself. I think about it for my
Mhm.
grandchildren. I live in fear for them. But as for
Wow.
myself, I just try to live my life as normal as I can and hope nothing happens. And I have my defibrillator in the event it does, and it will save me. I worry more about my great grandson, something happening to him, because he's just a year and a half old.
Does he have lung QT?
Yes, he does,
Oh my gosh.
unfortunately.
You are listening to Bereaved But Still Me. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our program, please send an email to Michael Lieben at michael@bereavedbutstillme.com. That's michael@bereavedbutstillme.com. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
Jackie, with everything that your mother was carrying, we know that she lived into her 90s, which is pretty good. Now, I'm about to bite myself on the lip for saying that, because I've always said that we don't congratulate people for being old, or whatever we think is old. We don't say, well, that's okay, because it's never okay. And your mother is still your mother, even if she lives to be 1,000. But 93 is still pretty good. So what do you attribute her longevity? Was it her family? Was there something in her spirit that just refused to give up? Is it something that you all did together? How did that happen?
Her mom lived to be 93. Actually, mom lived to be 94,
Ah,
which I was very fearful once she did turn 93 that would be the year, because she
mm,
seemed to take after her mom quite a bit. But that last year, I just started seeing a big decline in mom, but she had a strong will to live. She was afraid to die. I'm not going to lie. She was very fearful of death. And I do blame a lot of that on her heart condition, on her having those horrible seizures for years. And I think it scared her so bad. is one of the reasons she was just scared of the actual passing and what it would be like for her. I do think
Her
a lot
long.
of it is because of the long QT, actually.
So you're saying that part of her longevity was a fear of dying. She just refused to die because she was afraid to go there.
I agree. Yeah. And she had very good caretaker. I have to give myself credit for that. But yeah, she was very afraid of that. And well, I'm going to tell you about mom. She took her medication right on time. She might have forgot what she ate for lunch, but by gosh, she remembered that medication.
Well, that's good because I can't remember what I had for breakfast, or I can't remember my medication some days. And the worst is you've taken it, the box in front of you is empty, and you go, "Did I take that now, or was it this morning?"
I used to have to go over that with her quite often. And I would say that to her. She'd have I taken my medicine? I said, "What did you just eat?" She goes, "I have no clue, but did I take my medicine?"
We've all been there,
So
Becky. That
I
has
think
nothing to do with age, by the way. You're right. That's just flat out fear. It's nothing to do
yeah,
with
it
age.
is. But she was also fearful she didn't take her medicine, that it would
No,
consequences would be a seizure.
I know that so well. I know that oh so well. What would you say though? Would you say that she had, let's put a more positive spin on it rather than just the fear of death? Did she have some kind of joy of living? Did she live for her family? Was she a family kind of person? Did you all come over for dinner? A little bit of that. We want to celebrate her. We want to talk about some really happy moments.
Well, mom loved her family. She did. She just wanted to live. She really wanted to live to play. She loved to play cards. She loved to read books, and she loved to tell her story about what she had been through. And that gave her a sense of fulfillment. She did love her grandkids and her great grandkids. And actually, she had great grandkids.
Good on her. I had a neighbor who had over 60 grandchildren and great grandchildren, and she died just before number 60 arrived. And she knew everyone by
Oh.
their name. She couldn't tell you maybe what she had for breakfast, but she knew every kid by name and by order. There's something special about that, I think.
And what was her age?
She was 93 when she died.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
I'm going to digress for a moment. Well, she lived upstairs from me, and her daughter occasionally would spend days and nights with her. And it was clear to the daughter that it was time for her to go, but she was waiting. She was refusing to go, and she was suffering. She wanted to see number 60, which was due any day. And her daughter, who was a nurse, said to her, she said, "Mommy, you'll see him first." And with that, she left.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah. There's something about being 90 plus that makes you very sweet. Um, but yeah,
I agree.
they're both wonderful people. And the woman who was 93 who lived upstairs from me was a surrogate grandmother to my children. She would take in sewing, I think at least up to age 90. She would take in sewing, and she would never charge my kids for anything. She said, "I don't charge children." So anything I brought her that was for my kids was free. She was just that kind of person. She wasn't really doing it to make money. She was just doing it to keep her hands busy, but it was a thing. It was a thing. I get the feeling that Wilodene was that kind of a grandmotherly figure to people who just needed a grandmother.
I agree. Yeah, she was very well. An example was my friend. Her daughter-in-law was passing away from cancer, and she had two young children. And mom, of course, wanted to reach out and donate a little bit of money to help them out. So yeah, that's the kind of person she is or was.
What would you say is her greatest achievement of all the things that she's done?
Her greatest achievement is to
Yeah,
live to 94 years old
pretty
and
good.
to have children. Thankfully, she never had to bury a child, but when she buried my children, I would say that was about as close to children because she had a very good, nice bond with my children. They
Yeah.
were very close to grandma. And I think one of her big achievements also is I think I brought this up to you before, but years ago, when mom got the job at a hospital in the state
Mm.
of Indiana, and she couldn't type, so they moved her to the snack bar. And then she went on and received her degree to be a QMA, where she was actually handing out meds to patients. And that was a huge accomplishment for her, especially at the age of 55.
And that was before she knew about long QT, right? So
Yes, yes. And And she went on and
So
got a couple degrees and was passing out meds to the patients.
it's terrific. I didn't realize
Kudos,
she had
mom.
degrees. I did not realize she went and got a higher education at age 50. That's terrific.
It is,
That's just,
despite everything that, yeah, because she had 4 kids she needed to get raised, and she didn't really have a skill in any particular thing. So she ended up in the snack bar and then went on and got that skilled trade. I think that's amazing.
that's terrific. Hats off. I want to ask you one last question here before we take a break. If you had to sum up your mother's life in just one sentence, what would it be? And I'm a nice guy, so I'll give you 3 or 4 sentences.
I hope so. How would I
Take
sum
as
up my
much as you
mom's
need.
life? Fast and furious. I mean, my mom was a very honest and direct, but could be kind when she wanted to be, if you were deserving of kindness. If
Then
you weren't deserving, she would tell you.
well, then let me just say how lucky I feel because I spoke to her 3 times those years ago, each for I don't know, more than an hour. And I never got the impression from her that she didn't think I was worthy. And I appreciate it now,
Yes, because you would
knowing
have gotten that impression if she thought you wasn't. You would have known.
it's
I
probably a
knew by
low
the
bar
look on her
too.
face. Yeah, she was a very good person.
Well, I didn't see her face. I'll take your word for it. But you were there, you would know.
Oh, yes. Boy, do I know that look.
So she didn't suffer fools lightly, but what else can we say about her? You got another half a minute.
She did not mince words. No, not at all. Unfortunately, that gene could have been passed on.
If you've enjoyed listening to this program, please visit our website, heartsunitetheglobe.org, and make a contribution. This program is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to educate, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, hospitals that treat CHD survivors, summer camps for CHD families, and much, much more. Jackie, we know that your mother lived her life in fear after seeing so many people around her die over the years. What did you do to help her try to cope with that?
Well, I just tried to comfort her as much as possible. I encouraged her to read, to watch TV, anything to keep her occupied. She didn't always listen to me, but occasionally she would, even to talk on the phone, anything. I reached out a few times to get her professional help. It helped to some degree, but face it, when she woke up, she was still 90, 91, 92, and she was dealing. Well, we know what you're up against when you're that age. You don't have a lot of time left. I tried to get her active in some communities, the senior citizen community, to play bingo and to play cards, anything to interact with people her own age. But she got to where she couldn't go out that much, so she just would talk to some friends on the phone and talk to them and about her fears and just make it through another day, day by day. It was the same journey. She was always afraid when I was going to leave her. And I think once again, we go back to the heart condition, the long QT, that I think she was afraid that she was going to have a seizure or pass away while I was not home. So at the end, I try to limit leaving her unless someone was here with her. We did have a wonderful person come into my mom's life through hospice. She was a volunteer, and this lady is absolutely amazing, very religious, and she helped get my mom where she needed to be to realize when she passes that her life was just starting. It was not ending.
I'm really glad you said that because I'm going to go back to my neighbor upstairs who was a nurse. She was a nurse in a hospice. And she would say more than once, I'm not really a nurse. I'm a midwife to the next life.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It's such a nice way to look at it because I think the hardest thing and where all that fear comes from is what's going to happen to me. Where am I going? And maybe not so much where am I going, but that moment when I pass, is it going to hurt? I think that's universal. I really do.
What
But
do
I'm
I
going to
have to
venture.
go through to get like that, to get there?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I'm going to venture a guess here that part of her fear wasn't just about herself. I'm sure she was afraid for you when you went out and she couldn't see you. She couldn't protect you at that moment either.
I think you're correct. And she would always tell my husband that when this did happen, when she did pass, to make sure he took care of me. So you can see that from a mother or father's perspective, that she was afraid of leaving her children because she was
Sure,
leaving her earthly body.
sure, sure. Did she have an idea that if she did pass, she would be in a better position to protect you all?
I think there at the end, this volunteer worked wonders with her. She would come over for 3 or 4 hours a week and go through the Bible with her, reading
Hmm.
her scriptures and how wonderful it's going to be and how she's going to see all of her family that like she never really remembered meeting her father because she was only 2 when he passed. So yeah, she helped her in so many ways. And like you had said, on to the next chapter in your life, eternal life. And this isn't goodbye, it's just until we see you again.
One of the things I remember and I admired when you were on our podcast so many years ago was there was a passion that you both shared for advocacy. And I know that you and our executive producer, Anna Jaworski, have been talking about you taking your advocacy work to the next level. Can you talk to me about what you're planning to do?
Yes, me and Anna have talked about me possibly hosting a podcast on long QT syndrome,
Welcome to the
hoping to
family.
raise awareness. So I'm very excited about this next chapter in my life. And I'm hoping that we can reach out to some people and save a lot of lives, bring awareness, share mom's story that if they have been diagnosed with long QT, it's not a death sentence. You just have to take your medication and take care of yourself, and you can live a fairly normal life.
That begs a question for those of us who are less educated on long QT, and I admit to being one of them. Just how common is it? How many people are out there?
According to the NHS, long QT syndrome affects 1 in 2,000 people.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yes, it
That's a lot of people.
is.
Think about when you're in a place when you see 20,000 people. So that's 10 people who have lung QT right where you are.
Exactly. And probably not diagnosed, to be quite honest. So that's why people need to know where the closest defibrillator is and get trained on CPR. I think on a daily basis, as they're doing research, I think they're finding out more and more about this. And I honestly feel like it's more common than what people think. And I strongly encourage people to go to your doctor and not worry about them saying your child does not have a heart defect. Have them do an EKG, have them
Sure.
do an echocardiogram. There's so many different heart defects out there. In fact, LeBron
Well,
James' son just collapsed. Now, I would guess that he probably has some type of a heart defect. But once again, the examinations aren't digging in there to find this. And so they're just collapsing when they're playing ball.
I want to amplify that because I think a lot of people, we see this on TV every so often. Usually it's in high school at the end of a really good game, a footballer just falls over. And then they just go, oh, yeah, by the way, it looks like he had a congenital heart defect. People, it's not hard to check this.
No,
These things show
it's
up in
not.
EKGs and they'll show up on an ultrasound. You can see all of this stuff. And there's so much more that we know now than we knew even when my daughter was born 26 years ago. When my daughter was born, the pediatrician, the first thing she said was, be happy she was born now, not 20 years ago. Well, it's been 46 years since that 20 years ago. And we really know a lot more. And it's not that hard to find stuff. And it's a very simple test. So people, take heed. If you're listening and you have any kind of worry at all, or if you just have children, it doesn't hurt to go find out. Most of you will find out that there's absolutely nothing wrong. Okay, I promise you that.
Well,
But a few of you will, and will maybe save somebody here.
and people have to realize the doctor works for you. You don't work for the doctor. You're paying his wages.
True enough.
They'll say the doctor said, no, don't take, no, you be your own advocate.
Right. And I think that brings me into the last question here. Your mother was such a huge part of your life and for so long. I know you really miss her. What do you think you can do to celebrate her now? And how much a part of that would be advocacy as well?
Me and Anna had began talking shortly after Mom passed. And I think Mom would have just been thrilled to think about me actually hosting a podcast on a condition that has affected her whole life. I mean, since she's been 2 years old. So Mom would have been very proud of that. Anything to raise awareness, Mom was always on board with and was never afraid to try anything. We did newspaper write-ups, I think 2 podcasts with you. So yeah, she would be thrilled. And I just still talk to her just like she's here and what's going on. And I think she knows what's going on. I appreciate you doing this show to honor her memory as well.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I really wanted to say I met her only 3 times, never face to face, unfortunately. But it was a joy to speak with somebody who was that alive and that vibrant and that aware and concerned and active. And I met her 7 years ago. So she was in her mid 80s and doing great.
She was still a young person then.
She was a kid, but she had, I want to say she had the heart of a kid. She had the attitude of a kid. She was completely with it. And she had so much to tell and so many stories that I'll never be able to get from her now, but so many wonderful things to tell. I wish I had more and more time to just sit there and go over her entire life and see the world as she had seen it. And you don't get that many opportunities anymore. And I just want to say personally, for me, in the name, if I may be so bold, of the staff here at Bereaved But Still Me, she was a great lady. She was a wonderful person, a great person to talk to. And I would imagine she would be a great friend and a really good mother. I can see it. Mother, grandmother, great grandmother. I've seen that. I've seen the results of it. And I'm very proud that I knew her even just a little bit. And I thank you so much for being on this program with us.
Well, she absolutely loved being on your program. She thought the world of you. She loved one time I just turned on the podcast and put the earbuds and she's looking at me. That's me. And yeah, she really, I don't think she really knew what we were doing, Michael. I don't think she had a clue, but she did enjoy listening to it after it was done.
Well, she was a wonderful lady. She was a real grand lady, and I'm glad I knew her.
Thank you. I sure miss Mom.
And that concludes this episode of Bereaved But Still Me. I want to thank Jackie Renfrow for sharing her experiences and her stories about her mother and her wisdom with us. Please join us at the beginning of the month for a brand new episode. I'll be with you soon, but until then, please remember, moving forward is not moving away.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you have felt supported in your grief journey. Bereaved But Still Me is a monthly podcast, and a new episode is released on the first Thursday of each month. You can hear our podcast anywhere you normally listen to podcasts at any time. Join us again next month for a brand new episode of Bereaved But Still Me.